Welcome to the McFeely Mess Podcast at Inforum.com. In-depth conversations and opinion covering a variety of topics from the world of news, sports, and more. Here's Mike McFeely.
Welcome to another episode of the McFeely Mess Podcast at Inforum.com. I'm your illustrious host, super illustrious host, the best host. Grown men have come to me with tears in their eyes. Big guys, big fellas, strong guys. They've said, Mike, you are illustrious. I'm just back from vacation. Took a few days to go to Devil's Lake, North Dakota, to attempt to catch some walleyes. And so it's fitting that our guest on the podcast today is one Mr. Jack Zaleski, the former editorial page editor of the Forum, because Jack was a stalwart in Devil's Lake at the Devil's Lake Journal newspaper for many, many years. And he's told me many, many tales of Devil's Lake, and he still knows a lot of key people in Devil's Lake. So, Jack, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you, Mike. It's nice to be with such an illustrious host, and your introduction of yourself is making me cry.
But you're not a big, strong man.
No, I'm not a big,
big, strong construction worker. The biggest man I ever saw. Come out with tears in their eyes. Said, "Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, sir."
I get emotional when you talk about yourself like that.
Yeah, well, I do too.
You don't want to hear much more about those emotions. So.
No, I know. But I
yes, Devil's Lake. Almost 20 years I lived at Devil's Lake, one of the great cities of this state. We raised a family there, had a place on the lake, fought the water wars, know a lot of people up there, love them dearly, and get up there as often as we can year-round to visit with them. I have a very, very warm place in my heart for the community, the people, the lake up there at Devil's Lake.
I love. I often people accuse me of hating North Dakota, and I get a lot of emails saying, "Well, why don't you move?" It's like, well, I live in Minnesota as it is. I don't hate North Dakota. I hate the politics of North Dakota. I don't hate the people of North Dakota. I don't hate the state. It's a gorgeous place, and probably my favorite place to go in the state is Devil's Lake, and it's largely because I love to fish. And it's largely because it's the only place on this planet where I can actually catch walleyes.
It is one of the great walleye fisheries in the country. And I remember when restoration of the lake was taking place, when the dry cycle was ending, the wet cycle was beginning, and some of the great people from North Dakota Game and Fish got serious about bringing back that fishery. They started with northern pike, they went to white bass, and then the walleyes took hold. And for the last, I don't know how many years, Mike, you'd have to look at a calendar. It is a great place to fish, no matter what kind of, what species of fish.
Don't forget jumbo perch.
The perch in the winter through the ice, unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And it's, I take some family members of mine and a couple friends of mine up there. We have done this for the last, 4 or 5 years, whatever. And they're amazed at how much water there is around Devil's Lake. And we stay at Woodland Resort, long owned by the Blanchfield family. I know you know Kyle.
I do.
And Karin. Good people, great people run it, and that resort has become. It's gone from like a little mom and pop operation to something that rivals the resorts at Lake of the Woods or Leech Lake. It's
big
gorgeous.
Time. Kyle has done a great job, and his family have done a great job of turning that into one of the premier lake resorts in North Dakota. And you're like you said, it rivals some of the lakes, many of the resorts you see on the Minnesota lakes.
So when we trailered our boats up to the Minnewacan access because the west end of the lake is often better fishing than the main lake, the main bay. And as you drive from Woodland Resort, the 20 or so miles up to the Minnewacan access, you drive past a lot of water, and you drive over a lot of water, and you see a lot of water. And so my friends and family are just amazed at the amount of water, but I stun them with a couple of different things. Is number one, 10 years ago, there was way more water because the lake has lost about 4 feet of elevation since the peak in 2011 or so. So it's 13 years.
Right. They managed put a couple of outlets in, and they managed the level to about where it is now. Try to keep it a little bit higher maybe than it is now to maintain the fishing population, but to take some of that, to get some of that farmland that was flooded back into production. Takes a while after the water is off it. But when it really rains hard, when it gets wet, up she comes. That lake responds to precipitation. and to dry periods. And so, even with the outlets, when it really gets wet and rains, up she comes. And so, but the habitat, there's so much habitat, different kinds of habitat, spawning habitat, and growing fish habitat, deep water for fish. There's so much up there. It's a wonderful fishery. It's a wonderful incubator, nursery for fish.
The other thing that I amazed them with is that the lake at one point, there were meetings to save the lake because there was so little water in it. And this is before it started rising in about 1993 or so.
Right.
But it goes farther than that, and I've told them this weekend after we talked to Kyle, that Kyle Blanchfield has told me that his grandfather used to farm Creel Bay.
Yes.
During the Great Depression, because there was no water in Creel Bay.
You could walk across Creel Bay.
If you go out from where Woodland Resort is right now, it's nothing but water. Kyle said, my grandpa used to farm right out there because there was no water.
They'd farm they'd farm. All of East Bay was dry, and they'd cut hay out there. When it was wet enough, it was kind of a swamp. The Minnewacan Flats area to the west was a swamp. The East Bay area, the East Lake area, was swampy land. Tremendous waterfowl hunting. Now they've got 20, 30, 40 feet of water on them.
Yeah.
And you're talking about those years when they're trying to restore the lake. There was a group called the Lake Preservation Committee. I was on that.
Were you up there at that time?
Oh yeah, that was in the 80s. Mostly in the 80s when it started to come back. The lake started to come back early 90s.
Yep.
But before that and throughout that early period, I left Devil's Lake in about 1987, but it was on that Lake Preservation Committee with a lot of good citizens who worked hard to plug any outlets so that.
Think about that.
Right. And there was a structure called a weir under Highway 57 that goes down toward Fort Totten.
Yep.
That road's been rebuilt, and that weir had planks in it that held the water back so that the main lake would hold water while the east, instead of running toward the east and lowering level. So there was this effort to keep the main lake, the big lake, high, and it was a battle. It was a political battle. It went on and on and on and on. Then it started raining.
Yeah, so that we're getting way into the weeds here, but I like talking about Devil's Lake. So one more question.
Sure.
So right now the Spirit Lake Casino is off Highway 57.
Beautiful site,
and that faces the main lake or the main bay.
Main body of the lake.
Across 57 then is what's called Mission Bay.
Yep.
And then on the other side of another highway is East Bay.
East Bay, and then beyond that is East Devil's Lake,
yes.
And then Stump Lake.
Yes, and so this weir you're talking about was like where the bridge is by the casino?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, where Highway 57 and 20 cross the lake there on the way to Fort Totten and St. Michael and the casino.
Yes.
Right before you get to the casino, that road's been since rebuilt.
Yes.
The big bridge. It was a much smaller road, and that's where that weir was, and it would hold back the main lake. And the whole idea was to keep the main lake at a level where fish could thrive and the water quality would be as good as it could be.
And it's worked. And the walleyes, it was not great fishing. It was good fishing.
Yeah.
But the wind was down for us. And we did okay. I'm not very good, I said. So
you're not. You fish more than most people. So if you can't catch them, nobody can.
But we fished some on the Golden Highway, and that is the old. I think was it the Highway 19 that flooded. Back that went through Minnewacan there.
No, that was called the Minnewacan Flats Road. It came out of Minnewacan and went across to Graham's Island.
Yes.
Right, and we used to call it the Walleye Superhighway because we would, when it was still there and the lake was up and the road, we still know where the road was. I would fish with a friend, and we fished the ditches of that road. Of course, it was under a lot of water.
Yes, yeah.
And bam, 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 all the time. So it was good.
There's still walleyes there because we caught some fish on top of the Golden Highway and in the ditches as well. So
good. Sounds like you had a great time.
Devil's Lake it also has a soft spot in my heart as well. I'm not part of the community like you were, but I love going up there. I don't hate North Dakota people. I just don't hate North Dakota.
People don't seem to understand. You may live in Minnesota, but you live in Minnesota's 7th district, which may as well be North Dakota.
Correct. Other than the little city of Moorhead.
Other than Moorhead in your neighborhood.
Other than that, it is incredibly red.
It may as well be North Dakota.
Michelle Fischbach is not being mistaken for Barack Obama anytime soon. Politically.
Certainly not. Certainly not intellectually. Certainly not in thought. Certainly not in the way of thinking. Certainly not in the way of honesty in politics. No,
or getting anything done for the 7th District,
no comparison.
Other than introducing abortion bills that will never go anyplace because she's a one-issue.
I understand she has someone who is more in that vein more than she is running against her.
Yes, she's getting challenged from the right. Think about that.
Well, these are people who order cars from General Motors with the right signal or with the left signal removed. Who refuse to take a left turn at the intersection. So that's those kinds of folks. So
let's use that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, if they have a kid if they have a kid who tending toward left hand, they're probably going to drown him.
Good Lord. Okay, I didn't know you were going to go there, but okay.
You were talking water.
You can't have a lefty on the team.
Yeah, we're talking.
Let's use that inappropriate joke.
Just joking, folks. Relax.
Let's use that inappropriate joke to transition to politics and away from walleye fishing on Devil's Lake.
Speaking of inappropriate, politics.
Well, it's pretty much.
Yeah.
We are recording this on Tuesday morning, June 25th.
Yes.
And so in a couple of days on Thursday is a massive moment in the presidential election of 2024 because Democrat Joe Biden, the sitting president, and his challenger, or presumed challenger, but it's going to be his challenger, Donald Trump, the Republican, are going to get on a debate stage for CNN, and they're going to have what we in modern times call a debate, which it's really not. But they're going to square off and try to sway whatever undecided voters are left, and it may not be many, into voting for them come November. As a Democrat myself, I am as nervous for this debate as I was for the State of the Union address a couple of months ago. And Joe Biden, that was
out of the park.
That was a make or break moment in some ways, I thought, a couple of months ago. He hit a towering home run to left field. I mean, just crushed it.
Cleared the bases, yep.
And this debate, in my view, Jack, I don't know, I'll get your opinion, but I think it's as big of a moment, or bigger actually, in Joe Biden's chances of being reelected than much of anything else in this campaign. Your thoughts?
I think you're right, but you're also right when you say that there are people who won't be swayed, both on the left and the right, both in the Trump camp and in the Biden camp, who won't be swayed. So you forget about those people. And so the debaters, and again, I agree with you, it's not a debate. It's an exposition of positions, I guess, and a chance to look at these two men in action and see how they perform. I think they're going to be speaking to the undecided voters in the swing states. And there's a handful of swing states that the polls say are too close to call, or that Trump is leading in one or Biden's leading in another. And so these two gentlemen will be, Biden, the gentleman, and the other guy will be debating. There's nothing gentlemanly about. I can't remember his name.
Donald Trump.
That's it. So there's nothing gentlemanly about him, and I think that's part of his appeal to a large part of the country, which I don't know how that makes a lot of people feel, but it ought to make you feel sad. But anyway, so they're going to be doing their damnedest to look, if not presidential, to look sentient, because the age thing is a factor. Donald Trump is my age. Joe Biden is a little older. Watching Donald Trump in the last few months, and again, maybe because of the way I feel about him, I'm looking at him with a bit of a jaundiced eye, but he seems to be slipping intellectually, which is not a far slide for him, by the way, because there's not much up there. But, other than the kind of meanness and cleverness and nastiness that we've seen since he came on the stage, political stage. So we're going to be seeing how the age factor affects both these gentlemen. And on the other side is President Biden, and he's become known for the Biden shuffle because of the way he walks. Anyone who is of advanced age and has problems with hips or knees understands that. It has nothing to do with your mental capacity, however, or your energy level. It has to do with your skeletal systems and your muscles going to hell at that age. There's a whole industry in replacing hips and knees in this country. So, it's a big industry. So, but in terms of energy, if you pay attention to what President Biden has been doing since he came into office, the schedule he keeps, he actually gets up in the morning, unlike Donald Trump. He actually gets up in the morning and reads the security briefing, reads the CIA briefing, which Donald Trump chose not to do because it probably too complicated. He had to read it. But Biden keeps a schedule that would crush men younger than he. So. And whether you want to be honest about that or not, that's the way it is. Whether you like Biden or not, that's the way it is. He's keeping up a presidential schedule both domestically and in foreign travel that is admirable. And so we're going to be, but this stage, you're right, Mike, it could be a make or break moment for those undecided voters who are leaning one way or the other. And if either one of them makes the kind of snafu or makes the kind of bad impression on those marginal viewers, it could make a difference in those swing states.
There's the obvious concern from the Democrats that Joe Biden is a little slower than he used to be, that he looks old, he has the shuffle, and so there's a concern there. But I was listening to another podcast on my drive to Devil's Lake, interestingly enough, called Pod Save America. And it's done by a bunch of former Obama types and staffers and guys like that who are clearly from the left side of the aisle. They make no bones about it.
Sure.
But they said what the Democrats and what the White House are most concerned about isn't necessarily Biden in the moment. They think he'll be just fine. There's always going to be some mess ups and some misspeaks, because that's the way it works. But the Republicans and the Trump machine has gotten so good at taking snippets in concert, by the way, with networks like Fox News and Newsmax and conservative talk radio, that they are mostly concerned about the Trump campaign taking things out of context and using clips and videos and doing what they do really well and really cynically and really evilly, and throwing it all over TikTok and throwing it all over Twitter and throwing it all over Facebook and throwing it all over all the social media platforms. And people who frequent TikTok, for example, aren't reading the Forum newspaper, and they're not reading the New York Times, and they're not reading the Wall Street Journal or the New York Post, for God's sakes.
Right.
They're looking at TikTok and making their decisions based on that. And so that is, you can look at the Republicans and the Trump machine and kind of say, wow, politics is a dirty business, and they're really good at it. But this is also kind of a scary moment because of that, because people don't inform themselves as well as they should, and they watch a 30-second or 15-second TikTok video, and they see Joe Biden looking off camera when there's really a parachutist there in France, but the TV networks cut it off, and so it looks like he's looking off into space, and they make their decisions based on that.
Well, yeah, I think they'll do that. But the other side of that, Mike, and the other side of that is Donald Trump, who has absolutely no self-control or no ability to control what he says when he feels like saying it, also has left hundreds of those kinds of clips out there for his opponents to use against him. And some of them are outrageous, and I think that the Biden campaign and the surrogates for the Biden campaign will use Trump's words against him. Everything from the January 6th insurrection, which he is responsible for,
I'm sorry.
To the stuff he's been saying after getting out of his trial. He's a convicted felon. 34 convictions, 34 counts. He's a convicted felon. The Biden campaign is, they're a pretty sophisticated bunch of folks. They're going to use those things in a way that makes Trump look even worse than he is.
But nothing matters, though. I think you and I have talked about this before.
It doesn't for those core groups.
When it comes to Donald Trump, nothing seems to matter. I mean, he has 100 things that he's done or said that would have disqualified any other candidate of any party for the previous 247 years of our existence.
Yeah, I agree.
If any other presidential candidate had led an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol and clearly tried to overturn an election, that person would have been run out of the country. Donald Trump has done all those things. He's done multiple things.
Yes.
100. And his numbers don't move, Jack.
Undermine the judicial system.
Yes.
Undermine the election system.
His numbers don't move.
Right, but that's the point. His numbers don't move; they stay at the same level pretty much, and it's a bottom. It's his top. He's got a hardcore bunch of people who are with him. It's a lot. I'm not trying to dismiss who they are and how many there are. It's a lot. It's serious. It's a big chunk of the country who has somehow, been gassed by this guy, big time. And are fooling themselves into who he really is. They're redefining him to fit their own purposes, to justify their support for him, and it's a disturbing phenomenon. It really is. However, you still look at the majority of the country, the other 70% or so, depending on what poll you're looking at, who are not hardcore Trump people, who are not hardcore Biden people. Biden has a hardcore too of the Democrats. It's a little bit bigger than Trump's hardcore insurrectionist bunch, but and so I still think that no matter what the debate does, no matter what how the campaign unfolds, the battleground here is for those voters who are not committed in the way of the hardcore left or the hardcore Trumpkins, who are not committed in that way. And that's where the fight is, like it always is. And so, again, you have those handful of states, seven or eight states, depending on who's counting, where the election will be decided in the Electoral College.
Are you going to watch the debate? Let me ask you that.
Haven't decided yet. I have not decided.
You're undecided?
I am undecided. I'm undecided about watching the debate, yes.
Why?
Well, I think for a couple of reasons, and we alluded to a couple of them here. I'm so, and I try not to let this bother me so much. I'm so upset by by the constitutional crisis that Trump is causing. That I just get, I fear for the country when I watch these kinds of things. When I watch the political debates, when I watch some of the pundits on television, when I read what I read in the newspapers. And so you get to the point where you just want to back off for a while and say, geez, I got to get my head straight here, because this is not entertainment. This is not a cartoon. This is not like debates of the past. This is not like, even the Nixon-John Kennedy debate, the first one. There's so much more at stake here that sitting down to watch the debate and knowing the kind of ideology, the kind of approach to the foundations that make this country great that Trump is espousing, it just makes you crazy. You want to throw a brick at the TV, and that gets expensive. So I don't want to do that. No, but you see what I mean. I know I should watch it. Of course we should. We should watch it. But there's a mental health aspect to it.
Well, but right, and so I go fishing in Devil's Lake to regenerate my batteries the best I can.
Sure. I travel. I just got back from Vermont and Connecticut.
Right, and so I view this as a historic several months.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it has been the last few months. It has been for the last couple of years. But from now, leading up until the election in November, I mean, I can be a little dramatic sometimes, but it feels to me like the country is hanging in the balance here.
I agree,
and I don't want to miss it.
Yeah.
And my job is to pay attention to these things and to write about them occasionally. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like it's this odd feeling of I'm watching the United States of America come apart in slow motion, and we all know what's happening, and everybody sees it, and some people are trying to do something about it, but it just keeps on happening.
Yes.
Like nothing. That's why I keep saying nothing matters when it comes to Trump. He should have been disqualified from running for president, 2 years ago, 4 years ago.
I don't disagree about that at all. I think he's unfit.
So I have to watch it just to say, at least I watched it, and at least I commented on it, and whatever little platform I have to say, my God, people, look at what's happening here. Stop and look at what's happening. He's saying exactly what he's going to do. There's no mystery as to what he wants to do, and maybe more importantly, the people beneath him who are, now they're organized, now they know what they want, now they know how to work the levers of power, they're going to make all this stuff happen if he's elected.
Right.
And I'm watching it unfold, and I'm going, it's like watching two cars coming at an intersection in slow motion.
And knowing it's going to happen.
And telling people it's going to happen,
right.
And nothing's going to stop it.
Well, the thing is, I'm not as pessimistic, I think, about when you say nothing is going to stop it. I think there are a lot of people waving the cars off. There are a lot of people trying their damnedest, from podcasts like this one, to national pundits, to reasonable Republicans, sensible Republicans, who are warning about just what you described.
CEOs now. The CEOs are coming out and saying, after a meeting with Trump, that this is not going to be good if he's. And CEOs,
I know,
the richest men in America.
Yes, and they know that all these people who believe he is a brilliant businessman. The real brilliant businessman knows he's a fraud. They know he's a fraud and has been a fraud since the beginning. Without Daddy's money, he'd have nothing. Again, no one's going to move the people who are committed to him, either because they're so embarrassed they can't bear to change their mind and admit they were wrong, or because they really believe that the kind of vision for the country that he's presenting is what they want. There are those folks, and it's a small group. Relatively small. There's millions of people, but it's relatively small. And so I have to believe, I just have to believe in the faith of the majority of the people of this country, even if Joe Biden doesn't excite them as much as someone else might have on the Democratic side, that they're not going to stay home. They'll do probably what they did in 2020. If they can't vote enthusiastically for Biden, they'll come out and vote for Biden as a vote against Trump. And that's all we can hope for, Mike, here is the ballot. Because, and Trump has already said he won't recognize anything if he loses. He did. Yeah, he can say that all he wants, but he lost big time. The guy, he should have a program, The Biggest Loser, because you look at every time his issues and he himself have been on the ballot, but for once he's lost. And the one time he won, he was running against a flawed candidate who ran a lousy campaign. In Hillary Clinton. But when you look at the results of 2020, he didn't just lose. He lost significantly. A lot of numbers were piled up against him, no matter what he and his goons and his stooges say about the election. And I think that's where we're headed in November again.
Again, Trump is what he is, and everybody knows my feelings of him. But I'll give him this, and his people this, is prior to this debate, for the last week or so, maybe a couple of weeks, Trump's and his minions' deal has been, number one, CNN is stacked against me, right? It's Jake Fake Tapper. And it's 3 against 1. It's the two moderators and Joe Biden against me, poor little Donald Trump. So it's 3 against 1. Yeah. And he set that narrative.
Yes.
And all of his minions, including the once esteemed governor of North Dakota, Doug Burgum, have bought into that. The other thing that Trump has done, which is much more, again, evil is the word I keep using, but he is accusing Joe Biden of being on drugs. And at one of his rallies, he's accusing Joe Biden of doing cocaine, of being on cocaine.
Yeah.
And so they're asking for Joe Biden to take a drug test, Trump and his minions, before this debate, which any reasonable person goes, yeah, okay. But it's evilly genius. Because if Joe Biden is never going to submit to a drug test, why would he? Because he's not doing drugs. But if Joe Biden does well, and is as energetic and hits it out of the park like he did for the State of the Union,
he was hopped up.
Donald Trump can say, well, he's high as a kite. Of course he did well. If he doesn't, and he has a poor performance, then Trump can say, ha-ha, he was too afraid to take drugs because we called him out on it. This is the real Joe Biden.
Yeah, but these are the sideshows that Trump is known for. He does this all the time to divert attention from the major issue that the two men are going to be debating. And Trump probably, in his heart of hearts, is a little afraid of Biden because Biden is informed. Biden knows his stuff. Trump doesn't. Trump's a showman. So he has to do the stunt. The business with the drugs is a stunt. All this other stuff. These little sideshows that he does. That he's got the moderators against him. That's all a stunt. And he feeds. And those are red meat things that he feeds his. He feeds the. I'll try to be kind to them. He feeds his people.
Well, what word did you want to use? What word? This is a podcast. What word did you want to use?
Hyenas.
Okay.
Okay. Red meat, hyenas.
Okay, that's fine.
Jackals.
Yeah.
Pick something. And so this is all in his, as you say, he has a knack. Almost a brilliance of some sort for doing the sideshow, and that's much more interesting than talking about debate strategy, debates. How you run a debate or policy. This is much more fun to say, "Aha, they're against me," and the president is taking cocaine. I mean, it's ridiculous on so many levels, and most sane people, most reasonable people know that, but not his people.
Speaking of jackals. Doug Burgum is going to be at the debate, apparently, in his quest to be the vice president, the running mate of Donald Trump, on the ticket.
Well, he seems to want to spend time anywhere but in Bismarck these days.
Yes, he has stopped being governor for the last several months.
I wish we were close to Thanksgiving. I'd love to see if he'd come and pardon the turkey.
No, Tammy Miller did it last Thanksgiving.
I know.
Tammy Miller did it last Thanksgiving.
Tammy Miller. I remember that name.
That worked
Tammy
out
Miller.
for her.
Tammy Miller.
Again.
Gee, that rings a bell.
Again, Doug had abandoned her as quickly as he could once it became clear she wasn't going to come close to winning.
So did the voters of North Dakota.
Yes, I know,
voters
but she was Burgum's gal.
She was.
To run, which is fine.
She was, yeah.
But once it became clear that she was not going to even come close to Kelly Armstrong, Doug Burgum ran the other way as quickly as he possibly could to not be associated with her anymore.
He did.
Which is, again, shows some character or lack of character on his part.
Yes.
What do you make of Doug Burgum recently with just the... he called America a dictatorship under Joe Biden, which he was called out for by me and others for just being ridiculous. But he has defended it, saying, well, he gives executive orders.
Well, the fact of the matter is, as you pointed out in your column and others have said, when you count up the executive orders, Biden is not even close to what Donald Trump did. And apparently he wasn't a dictator in Doug Burgum's eyes. Doug Burgum's eyes are clouded. I mean, talk about political cataracts. This guy is blind. And it's too bad because the Doug Burgum we knew here in Fargo for many years, decent man, doing good things, who understood empathy, who understood gratitude, which he talked about during the COVID years. All that's gone if he has hitched his star. If he's hitched his wagon to the Trump train, then he has given up any notion of a decency and ethical conduct as a politician. He has given up and scuttled and tossed to the wayside the values, the North Dakota values he says he learned growing up in a small town of Arthur, just a few miles.
Did he grow up in Arthur?
He did. He did.
I hadn't heard that.
He did. And, and we look at, the small town values crowd, and if they've agreed with Trump, if they're in the Trump camp, in the Trump cult, Burgum is now firmly in the cult, not just in the camp.
Correct.
Then they have walked away from what North Dakota, small town, or Fargo values that they say they might have had. You can't have it both ways. You are judged by the company you keep.
Doug Burgum said that one time.
He did say that.
When he said he wouldn't do business with Donald Trump.
Now he said, and there's the other thing. I saw him do an interview on one of the Sunday morning shows where somebody brought up that fact that he said he wouldn't do business. He said he's changed his mind because he spent a lot of time with him. And he said he's one of the most sharpest, interesting,
funny,
competent businessmen. He gets things done. What he did not speak to is Trump's basic values as a man, as a human being. He talked about how he conducts business business. And Doug Burgum, our governor, oh, God, it's hard to say that, but Doug Burgum admires that. So apparently, it's okay if you're a corrupt and fraudulent businessman, as Trump's record shows he has been most of his life. But his basic values as a man, as a husband, as a father, as a decent human being, apparently, which, we all know what those are for Trump, apparently that doesn't matter. That kind of character doesn't matter in a political leader. That's disappointing because that's not the Burgum we knew when he was doing good things for this state.
One of the things that I define as that helps define small town values is, for example, helping out a neighbor in need, right? That's North Dakotans and rural Minnesotans strongly pride themselves on stepping up and helping a farmer who's sick, or throwing a sandbag for a neighbor, or the examples are countless, and they're real.
Yep,
they're real.
Yep.
We work hard in the upper Midwest, and we like our neighbors, and we politically, whatever your denomination is, we don't care.
Doesn't matter.
You know what? Your place is going to flood. I'll throw a sandbag for you.
Yeah.
If Donald Trump was walking down the street, the main street in Arthur, North Dakota, and he saw somebody on the opposite side of the street on fire, Donald Trump would not walk across the street to piss on that person to put the fire out unless he could figure out how he was going to benefit from it first.
All about him.
And if there was not a way for him to benefit from it, he would keep on walking.
Mm-hmm.
And as you said, yet the small town value crowd believes that he is one of them,
right.
which I think many of them know he's not.
Of course
but he has other beliefs, shall we say, that attract them to him.
This guy is a big city, privileged, entitled, spoiled kid.
I've been outside Trump Tower in Manhattan.
Yes,
Fifth
so
Avenue.
have I. And it's a garish, ugly thing.
But you couldn't get farther away from Arthur, North Dakota,
no.
than Fifth Avenue in New York City.
Right. I mean, his idea of rural is Central Park. So
Which is beautiful, by the way.
Beautiful park in New York. But so the idea that rural America, who during his years, because of his China tariff policy, turned farmers into welfare queens. The idea that they can glom onto this guy, not that they're going to love Biden. I understand that. That's a Democratic-Republican thing that goes back forever. Yep. But the idea that they can pledge this kind of boot-licking, butt-kissing fealty to a man who has nothing in common with them, nothing. In fact, he disdains them. He thinks nothing of them. They're not important to him. He's an urban rich kid, and he's a privileged urban rich kid who started out on daddy's money, ran a fraudulent business for years, stiffed everybody he could, bankrupted how many times, dodged the draft, and these people love him. I find that difficult to believe.
Here is my theory on Doug Burgum, and let me see if you agree with me. Maybe you don't, which is fine, is that Doug Burgum decided at some point, possibly even before he got into the presidential race, I still think that possibly Doug Burgum's attempt at running for president was an attempt to get into the circle of candidates to get access to Trump, to try to impress him. Doug Burgum's a smart guy. I think it might have all been a long play for Doug. But he sees this as his one shot to be nationally relevant, to be a vice president, to possibly be president. That Doug Burgum, Arthur, North Dakota chimney sweep, tech genius, philanthropist and businessman in Fargo, he looks at this and says, I have one shot at being president of the United States. One. Mm-hmm. And this is it. And I'm going to do whatever it takes for this one shot, no matter how disgusting it is, no matter how yucky it makes me feel, even though I don't think it does. This is it. This is my moment. This is, we all have one moment in life when we have our shot to be what we've always wanted to be. And this is it for him, and he's just going to do whatever it takes. And Doug Burgum could ask him to do, Donald Trump could ask him to do the most humiliating thing at this point.
Which he has been doing.
And Doug Burgum would do it and not think twice about it.
I think, I think the evidence is there already. I mean, he's already saying things that are outrageous, like it was a sham trial in New York. It was no such thing. It was a jury of his peers, not exactly his peers, but people in New York, finding him guilty. And Doug Burgum is out there doing the boilerplate, doing the stuff from the Trump playbook, embarrassing as hell. I think for most North Dakotans should be embarrassed that their governor is in that crowd. So you're right. He's already shown what he'll do in order to keep in Trump's good graces. The talk shows, the morning talk shows on Sunday, the one he was on, I mean, it was like, are you kidding me? It was all from the Trump playbook. It was all a regurgitation of what Trump has been saying for years about pick a subject. And there was Burgum right there, as if Trump's hand were stuck in his back, and he was doing the ventriloquism bit. Don't get me wrong, Burgum is smooth on TV. He's gotten better. He's learned the game. He's very good. He's articulate. When subjects that he knows about, energy, for example, come up, he's very good. But when it comes to the political ideology of Donald Trump, it is so difficult to hear him repeat almost verbatim what Trump has been saying for a long time.
Last one. I'm going way deep in the weeds here.
All right. There's ticks in the weeds.
What percentage of Americans would be okay with an authoritarian government? Because I think it's a fairly significant number. It might be 30%.
Yeah, I think
that would be okay with a dictator, because they think that they're in the right group of people. Mm-hmm. That if the other people, minorities, homosexuals,
the other
journalists,
the other, yeah,
the others are going to be the ones that pay the price. And for that 30%, they think life would be really easy, and the other people wouldn't then be nipping at their heels, trying to pass them. And also, it'd be really easy because you don't have to think. You can just do and be told what to do. Do you think, have I been vacationing too much, staring into the sun?
No, there's a parallel. A Western nation, parallel, a civilized, nation.
Very
parallel,
civilized.
In the 1920s and 30s, Germany. And they were pining for a leader, and they got one. Made the trains run on time, I hear. Built a few buildings. Killed millions of people.
Yes.
But the people of that country, enough of them were with him, and the rest of them followed. In order to survive, the rest of them followed. So the parallel's not exactly, perfect.
Nope.
I mean, it's different because our systems are different. Our foundational institutions are different. We've got a lot going for us to not let that happen. But the instinct of that is in people, and I think you're seeing it. You're seeing it not only what his people say. Some of the insurrectionists have said pretty much the same thing. But if you listen to what he says, it's not hard. It's not hard to find similar kinds of sentiments, nativist, racist, homophobic, anti-intellectual, burn the books, in history, in recent history, that people should all know about.
Yeah.
So, there's that tendency. I think we have the institutions and enough good people in those institutions, both in the private sector and in government, to not allow it to happen. But that force in the country, as represented and led by Donald Trump, is there, no question.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's a larger percentage than we'd like to think about. That would just be okay with it, because it makes life easier for them, and they think life is terrible right now, even though
It's not.
as I've said and written multiple times, if you're in, pick out a town, if you're in Williston, North Dakota, you are under no threat from any of the things that you say are threatening the country. Nothing. You are in God's country, and there is not a problem to be had other than paying your bills and having some fun.
Right.
But yet, something has convinced those people that the country is a mess and they are scared to walk down the street, or they say they are. It's just amazing. It's again, I'm watching this unfold, going, what is happening? I don't know what's happening anymore.
That European country we're talking about in the 20s and 30s mastered the big lie, and we're seeing the mastery of the big lie now among people of similar persuasion.
Thank you, my friend. Jack Zaleski, former editorial page editor of the Forum.
Nice to be with you, Mike.
Joined us today on the podcast. Thank you for listening. And remember, as always, folks, do please buy a subscription to the Forum and inforum.com, our website, so we can continue to do great work and keep you informed in this area. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the McFeely Mess Podcast at inforum.com. For more podcasts and columns, head to inforum.com and search Mike McFeely